want to prepare your classroom. So I wanted to get you a little prepared to hear Howard Melton's story today. We were going to have Al Better, his friend, who I'm sure you'll talk about a little bit too, with him, but the weather kind of made him a little nervous to travel today. So we're just very grateful that Howard, being the brave, courageous soul he always is, got into his car and drove all the way to Madison. So we're glad. So Lithuania, this is Lithuania in 1933. Lithuania is the southernmost of the three Baltic countries, Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania. Howard specifically, and Al, he was here, grew up in Kovno. Today it's known as Kaunas, and I'll show you today's map looks a little bit different. But starting in 1933, actually Lithuania and Germany had a non-aggression pact. So Germany said, I won't attack you, but you'll be kind of, we'll be kind of friends in a way. We're not going to have war against each other. That's what they said. Then 3 months later, they decided to annex part of Lithuania into Germany. Of course, it was a part that had a majority of Germans living there, but that's what they did. And in so that was, probably like in 1939 that was going on. In 1940, the Soviets came in and they occupied Lithuania, that I think that drummed up some of those anti-Semitic feelings. The Jews were blamed for everything that the Soviets did, and for the Soviets being there and occupying their country, of course they blamed the Jews. So that didn't help things. And then in 1941, when Germany started marching through Poland and World War II had started, the Germans eventually did occupy Lithuania, and were there. And once they were there, if you know what happened as the Nazi army moved east through Poland into the Soviet Union, behind them was something called the Einsatzgruppen. Anybody know what the Einsatzgruppen were? Yes?
The mobile killing units that followed from the army and assigned to the area.
They were the mobile killing units. So the army would go in and they would take over, they would fight, and they would take land as they went along and move farther inland. And behind them there were these squads called killing squads, Einsatzgruppen, who would go into the rural villages as they went along, and they would round up all of the Jews. They would usually take them out into the forest. They would usually have people in the village, they would make them dig big ditches, and they would take the Jews, men, women, and children, line them up next to the ditch and shoot them. And when World War II started, there were about 160,000 Jews in Lithuania, and quickly thousands and thousands were being killed. By 1941, actually there was a large influx of Jews from Poland who were trying to escape the Nazis and went to Lithuania. So the Jewish population grew to about 250,000. And so they went through killing Jews. They, in the bigger cities, they would congregate the Jews into the ghettos, especially in Kovno. And I don't think Vilnius was part of Lithuania then, was it? No. Then it was part of Poland. But eventually there were about 40,000 Jews left, and they were sent to either the ghettos, they were sent, about 5,000 were sent to death camps in Poland, and in the fall of 1944, about 10,000 Jews from Kovno were sent to concentration camps in Germany. In the Holocaust, about 90% of the Jews of Lithuania were killed. And so that's a little bit of background on that. Today, Lithuania looks a little bit different. So I just wanted to have you see that a little bit, but sometimes that visual helps. And with no further, do you want me to leave the map on there?
Yeah, the map on now.
The map on now? Okay, you have it. And with great respect and pleasure and honor, I want to introduce just a very, very special, important young man. His name is Howard Melton, and he's going to tell you his story.
I'm not a professional speaker. I hope everybody can hear me, and I hope everybody can understand what I'm saying. If you don't, I'll be more than happy to repeat it. On June 22nd, 1941, I was in a summer camp about 35 kilometers from Kaunas, which was my hometown. We woke up about 3, 4 o'clock in the morning. We heard noises, and we found out that Germany had launched Operation Barbarossa, the attack on the Soviet Union. They took us back to our hometown. Of course, the Germans were bombarding the main centers. Kaunas had a small airport, so German planes were bombing the airport and the rest of the city, the railroads and everything. Most of the Jews started running away from the Germans. We knew the Germans didn't treat the Jews very well. We didn't know they were going to kill us. So my mother, my father, older sister and I, and a younger sister and I, and thousands of other people started running away. They're running towards Russia. German planes used to come over, started strafing us because there were some Russian soldiers running away at the same time. We got about 35 kilometers or so from my hometown, a little town called Yanova. We stopped for the night. We woke up the next morning. We found out that the Germans had dropped parachutists up the road, and we were cut off. So we went back to our hometown, which was Kaunas, Lithuania. At that time it was the capital. Now it's Vilnius. Vilnius is the capital now. In Kaunas there lived about 160,000 people, and about 40,000 were Jews. So the Jewish population was about 25%. Before the Germans came in, the Lithuanians, who are very anti-Semitic, they still are, with their unmitigated hatred for the Jews, killed between 8 and 10,000 Jews. One day they were your neighbor, the next day they came in, robbed you, raped you, and killed you. For no other reason, because you were a Jew. When the Germans came in, any Jew that fell under the German occupation was automatically sentenced to death. They didn't care if you were 2 days old or 90 years old. If you were a Jew, you had a death sentence on you. When the Germans came in, they picked Jewish men and Jewish women off the street and took them to the 7th fort or 9th fort. Kaunas had 10 forts built around the city during the First World War. What they were used during normal times is to house prisoners. So they took Jewish men and women up there and just shot them, killed them. On July 7th, they decided, they told the all the Jews have to wear the yellow Star of David front to back. Now, they had no problem recognizing who was a Jew. They passed right away anti-Jewish laws. You could not walk on the sidewalk. You could not use public transportation. You could not go to a cinema. You could not go to a park. In other words, you could not do anything any normal person would do. In other words, they tried to dehumanize you. And if you're not a human being, they can do with you whatever they want. So they had a curfew for Jews. You know, we did not have any supermarkets. So most people bought their foodstuffs in the open markets. Jews could not be on the streets before 10 o'clock in the morning or after 4 o'clock in the afternoon. Usually the markets open up early in the morning, maybe 5, 6 o'clock in the morning. So by the time the Jews were allowed to go shopping, there was very little left. So the atmosphere was very bad. Finally, the Germans decided to put all the Jews in a ghetto for our own protection. They picked the poorest suburb of the city called Williampol, the Lithuanian, and Slobodkin Jewish. There lived between 8,000 and 10,000 people in this little suburb. The Gentiles had to move out and the Jews had to move in. By that time there were about 30,000 Jews in the city. You had to exchange living quarters with the people that lived in the little suburb. We were lucky, we exchanged, we got a house, and the people moved in our apartment in the city. But a lot of people didn't have any place where to move to. So they moved in schools, in public buildings, and the ghetto was very crowded. They picked this little suburb of the city, which was the poorest suburb of the city, without any running water, any sanitary sewers, without any sidewalks. So the situation was very bad. They made the Jews build a fence around it, and anybody caught outside the fence after August 15th, 1941, would be shot on sight. And they meant it too. But they had this problem. There was a main roadway running right through this little suburb. We didn't have many main roadways to begin with. They couldn't shut it down. So what they did, they built a small ghetto on one side of the roadway and a larger ghetto on the other side of the roadway, connected with a wooden bridge over the main roadway. On October 7th, 1941, the Germans decided it was not a very good arrangement. The old age home, the hospital, the orphanage were all in the small ghetto. There were about 6,000 people in the small ghetto. They boarded up the hospital with nurses, doctors, patients, visitors, whoever was in there, set it on fire, burned everybody to death. They took about 6,000 people, took them up to the 7th fort, and shot them. Killed them, men, women, and children. On October 28th, 1941, that's what we called the big action. The Germans decided there were too many unproductive people in the ghetto. unless you worked for them, you helped them during the war, they didn't keep you around. So everybody had to assemble on an open place called the Mokwatu place. You had to be there 6 o'clock in the morning. Nobody went to work. They didn't care if you were crippled or sick or whatever. You had to be there. You had to leave your doors open. You had to leave your windows open. Anybody caught in a home after 6 o'clock in the morning would be shut inside. And they did it too. There were two men, one SS man named Rauka and one SA man named Jordan. And he came before them as a family or as an individual, whichever way you wanted. And they looked you over. If you were young, healthy, they thought they could get some work out of you, they sent you to the left. If you were too old, too sick, crippled, they sent you to the right. They took about 10,000 people, put them in a small ghetto overnight. The next day they took them up to the 7th Fort and shot them. Men, women, and children. After that, there was lots of room in the ghetto. That's where I lost most of my family. My grandparents, aunts, uncles. In February 1942, they took 500 men and shipped them up to Riga, Latvia, which is the next country above Lithuania. And the reason they shipped them up there is because the Latvians, who were also very anti-Semitic, killed most of the Jews in the ghetto. And they needed some slave laborers to help them build out the airport. So it happened that they took my father with the 500 men. In October 1942, they came around and they asked for volunteers to be shipped up to Riga. Usually you don't volunteer for anything. But my mother knew that my father was shipped up there, so she volunteered. So my mother, my older sister and I, and my younger sister and about 500 other people were shipped up to Riga, Latvia. Maybe that action that my mother took saved my life. Didn't save my mother's life or my sister's lives, but maybe it saved my life. Because when we were shipped out from the Kovna ghetto, they turned it into a concentration camp. And they took all the children that were not at work, and they shipped them to Auschwitz. The camp up there was run by the Air Force, by the German Luftwaffe. And it was not as rough a camp as camps run by the SS. We worked at the airport, but they had a farm up there, and they asked for volunteers to work on the farm. I volunteered to work on the farm. Of course, working on the farm was not as hard as working at the airport. You could always get an extra carrot or an extra potato, an extra slice of bread. So it wasn't bad. The camp was not bad at all because we were housed in an old brewery. Actually, there was no fence around it. There was just a brick wall around it. We worked 12 hours a day, 6 days a week. But the work was not bad. We weren't treated bad. And the food was not too bad either. But in the summer of 1943, the SS took over our camp, and things changed for the worse. They took everybody that was not at work and shipped them to Auschwitz. That's when I lost my younger sister. Had I not been working, I would have been shipped up too. in spring of 1944, the Russian front got pretty close to us, so they shipped us back to Lithuania, to work camp in Lithuania. Then they shipped us to a ghetto in Šiauliai for about a week. And then from there they shipped us to concentration camp Stutthof, which is on the Baltic Sea in Poland. And that was the last time I saw my mother and my older sister. When we got into Stutthof, they separated the men from the women, took everything away from you, gave you a shower. We were happy that water came out instead of gas. Made you spread eagle, made sure you didn't hide anything. They gave you a striped uniform, a coat, a pair of pants, and a pair of wooden shoes. Wood on the bottom and leather on top. They used to call those shoes klumpers, like the Dutch usually wear. And every prisoner got a colored triangle with a number. Now Jews had yellow triangles, political prisoners had red triangles, homosexuals had pink triangles, criminals had green triangles. So when they looked at you, they knew what you were in there for. They took everything away from us, and they gave us a little metal bowl, a little metal cup with a piece of string or piece of wire to hold our pants up. We slept in the barracks on those three-tiered wooden bunks. We were about maybe 200, 220 boys between the ages of maybe 10 to maybe 14. We didn't find room in a bunk, we just slept on the floor. We were guarded by two kapos. Every barracks had overseers, they were called kapos. And those two kapos had green triangles, so we knew they were in there for criminal activity. Every morning, they used to chase you out of the barracks, and each kappa stood at either side of the door with sticks and club at you. And if you happened to sneak by, they'd call you back and give you twice as much. In the morning, they gave you some coffee called a Satzkaffee, substitute coffee, made out of burnt straw, a slice of bread, and a piece of margarine. And you sat in the sand. That was in middle of June. The weather was pretty warm. Till about 11:30, they gave you some soup made out of weeds and a few floating potatoes in it, and a slice of bread. You sat in the sand again. Till about 5:30, they repeated the process. I have a friend here. He was supposed to come with me today, but the snow scared him away. We were from the same hometown. We were all the camps together, liberated together, and actually because of him, I came to the United States. He's about 3 years older than I am. He went to school with my older sister. We wanted to get out from Stutthof in the worst way, because we knew that any day they're going to come along, they're going to take us to the gas chamber, because we didn't do anything. We didn't produce, we didn't help them. Finally, when we first got to the camp, they took most of the men and they shipped them to Dachau. I wanted to go with my father, but they wouldn't let me because I was too short, I suppose. So I stayed in Stutthof. But then they came around, they were short 50 men for work transport to concentration camp Dachau. They said anybody that's 15 years old or older should come forward. I wasn't, but I told them I was. So they shipped us to concentration camp Dachau. And from there they shipped us to Dachau had 10 sub-camps. They were called Außenlager. They shipped us to camp number 10, which was a brand new camp. We were about 500, I think 550 men. We slept in barracks. I don't know if you can call them barracks. You can imagine just a roof laying on the ground, no walls. And the roof was covered with sod. So when American planes flew over, they wouldn't recognize it as a camp. It was just seeded grass. We built a factory from the ground up, actually. We manufactured concrete beams reinforced with steel about 40, 50 feet long. The Germans were going to use to build underground airports to get to all the mountains. The work was pretty hard. We worked 12 hours a day, 6 days a week. Worked on cement mixers, handled cement bags, 40, 50 kilograms each. The food was not too bad at the beginning. At the beginning they gave you a loaf of bread divided by 3 people and soup twice a day. But towards the end of the war, the Germans themselves were short on food. They gave you a loaf of bread divided by 10 people and soup once a day. And the person that divided the loaf of bread got the last slice, so you made sure to divide it evenly. In middle of April, the American front got pretty close to us, so they marched us back to Dachau. It took us about 2 days to get there. And we got to Dachau. Situation was horrible. We saw those railroad cars with dead people laying inside and out. And it's terrible. But evidently we must have been the best looking specimen that came in there, because they gave us a shower and they told us to report the next day to the gate. They gave us a small loaf of bread and a can of meat, which we hadn't seen maybe in a couple of years. Of course, if you were smart prisoners, and I think most prisoners that survived that long were pretty smart, the first thing you did, you ate it, because then nobody can steal it from you. We were about maybe 2,000 regular prisoners and about 5,000 Russian prisoners. We didn't know that Russian prisoners in Dachau, but they did. They marched us out. We were guarded by assessment with German Shepherd dogs. The first couple of days we started marching in the daytime, but then American planes came over and started strafing us. Because we were long columns, they didn't know who we were. We started marching at night. No food, no water. If you fell down or lay down, they started the dogs on you. The dogs started biting you. If you didn't get up, put a bullet in your head. That was the end of you. Finally, on May 1st, they marched us into a small ravine. We were mounted on 3 sides with little hills. And my friend and I, we shot some machine guns on those hills. And we said goodbye to each other because the Germans had told us, 5 minutes to 12, we're going to get rid of you. We're not going to leave you alive. So we said goodbye to each other. But we woke up the next morning. Evidently, the commander of the transport decided not to kill us. Maybe he wanted to save his own skin. So they marched us out again, marched us another maybe 20, 30 kilometers. the masters into some woods. We stayed there overnight, and we woke up on May 2nd, covered with about 2 inches of snow. During the night, the guards had disappeared, the dogs had disappeared, they're all gone. 2 older German soldiers that started drafting people in the 60s towards the end of the war, masters in this little village called Wackkirchen. And about 1, 2 o'clock in the afternoon, we saw some tanks coming down the road with some white stars on them. We didn't know the Americans used white stars, we did the Russians used red stars. But the first tank that came into this little village was very dirty. But when it left, it was very clean, because people were crying and kissing it, and it's like getting your life back. The Americans were very good to us, maybe a little bit too good. Because after not having eaten for 7, 8 days, the Americans gave us chocolates, sea rations, hamburgers, and being so emancipated, people overate. A lot of people died from overeating. My friend and I, we were in and out of hospitals for about 2 years afterwards. American hospitals, German hospitals. And in December 1947, my friend decided to immigrate to the United States. He came here on an orphan quarter because his parents were killed during the war. I stayed in Germany. I kept getting letters from him how wonderful this country is, wonderful the people are, so I decided to come here too. So I came here in August 1949. In June of 1950, the Korean War broke out. If you wanted to become a citizen, you had to serve. My friend got drafted into the United States Army. I didn't want to get drafted, so I joined the United States Air Force. I served for 4 years in California. I got married to my still beautiful wife in June 1951, 2 weeks after she graduated from high school. And we've been married 60 years last year. We have 4 children, we have 9 grandchildren, and we have 3 great-grandchildren. I can tell you one thing though. When I awoke on May 2nd, 1945, if I could have written my own future, I don't think I could have done a better job. Because life has just been wonderful. Now the food in the camps was mostly bread and potatoes. I found out after the war that the Germans allowed each prisoner 800 calories per day. I don't know, what do we have now, 2,000, 2,500? Now you know, if they only allowed you 800 calories and they worked you at hard labor, what they were trying to do is work you to death. And they achieved their goal. A lot of people died from malnutrition. A lot of people died from hunger. In the ghettos, they gave us some horse meat. And horse meat is actually a sweet-tasting meat. I'm sure they weren't from young horses, it must be from old nags. But it's still, when you're hungry, everything tastes good. I don't know if anybody in the United States knows what hunger is. I mean, really hunger. They probably know that in Darfur, maybe in Africa. But here in the United States, I don't think anybody knows what hunger is. Hunger is such a horrible feeling that you don't think about anything else. You don't think about life, you don't think about liberty, you think about only put something in your mouth to be able to eat. Some people ask me a question, what were you thinking when you were laying there in the barracks at night, hungry and tired? What were your thoughts? What were you thinking about? My thoughts were have a small loaf of bread to myself. That was my most important part. Anything, when you're really hungry, anything you could eat, anything you could put in your mouth. Grasshoppers taste good. Potato peelings are a delicacy. Sometimes what if you get sick and when they get well, they say, oh my God, I'm so hungry I can eat a horse. Well, I did. When they were taking us from the woods to this little village, there were some dead horses laying on the side of the road, maybe shot down by planes, I don't know. But the prisoners jumped on them, picked them clean. By the time I got there was nothing left. I took a rock, poked the horse's head, and ate some of the marrow, which tasted great. I'm sure some of the prisoners that ate the horse meat didn't survive. In the last camp where we were, they gave us some. Towards the end of the war, they gave us some bread. We called smoking bread. Who knows what smoking bread is? The bread was so moldy. I don't know what they put in it. They put sawdust in it or something in it. The bread was so moldy that when you ate it, green smoke came out of your nose. Oh, it tasted good. Like I said, in the camps, most of our food was potatoes and bread. In the last camp where we were, the Germans did not have any refrigeration. So even though southern Bavaria, it still gets below freezing there in winter time. So they did dug ditches in the ground, lined it with straw, put the potatoes in it, covered it with straw and do it. And every day they used to take so many potatoes out of the ditch to feed themselves and their prisoners. One of the ditches got full of water and the potatoes rotted. Everybody knows what rotten potatoes smell, right? Horrible smell. But those potatoes were so rotten you didn't have to peel them. Because the skin was that far away from the meat, all you had to do was just break the skin open and you had the meat of the potato in your hand. Now you know, unless you take a shower every day or change your clothes, you accumulate lice. And lice live on only one thing: human blood. The only time they gave us a shower when they shipped us from camp to camp. They gave you a shower, sprayed you with DDT, and changed your clothes. In the last camp where we were, we did not have any sanitary facilities except cold water basins and some toilets. If you got sick, they shipped you back to Dachau. That was the end of you. Now, unless you got rid of the lice got rid of you. If you had a sore or a cut or anything, the lice would congregate and actually suck the blood out of you. In the last camp, we had a little iron stove in the middle of the ditch. It was just the barracks was just a roof laying on the ground, no walls. And there was a ditch dug in the middle, and we slept on either side on boards with straw and blankets. 25 people to a side, 50 people to a barracks. And we had a little stove in the middle of the ditch to keep us warm. I got out at night, got some of those rotten potatoes. My friend and I were making potato pancakes. Just break it open, and we made potato pancakes on this little wood-burning stove. At the same time, there were prisoners still lousing themselves. But the lice usually accumulate in the seams of the clothing. You took your coat off, your pants off, and you wind the seam of your clothing on this hot little stove. The lice with their parents would jump off. Either way, you get rid of them. You either get rid of the lice, or the lice got rid of you. I saw something that I can't get out of my mind. I think it'll be with me the rest of my life. I saw a dead man actually move. He said, it's dead. I mean, there's nothing unusual in saying dead man. I mean, you were just happy you didn't lay there yourself, because you could lay there in the next couple of seconds. But he was dead, and he was actually moving. He was so covered with lice. The lice were moving, and were actually moving the body. It's a very unusual sight. I still can get rid of, I still can picture it in my mind. It's something, I'll have to live with it, I suppose.
How much time?
We had planned until about 1:45, but take us about
20 minutes.
Well, I would like to open it up to questions now. The only thing I would ask you to do is stand up and speak up loud, because my hearing is not as good as it used to be. I have a hearing aid, but I only have one because one of them broke. I get it from the VA, so I probably won't have it till next week. So I would appreciate if you would just stand up and speak up loud, and unless Buddy wants to repeat the question from the people that have any questions. If I can answer it, I'll say so. I'll be happy to do it. If I can't, I will say so. Any questions? Don't be afraid. Don't be intimidated, because maybe I'm, I consider myself a very shy person. When my daughter got married in 1976, I couldn't even come to the microphone and say hello to people. I was so petrified. But since 1995, I think, 96, I've been talking, and I'm getting more used to it. So if you have any questions, I'll be more than happy to answer.
Howard, what was your life like in Riga when you were there with your father? Did anything?
I was there with my father and my mother and my sisters. The whole family, the whole family were there.
Was there anything that happened there that you can tell
No,
us?
there was the German Air Force treated us pretty nice. I mean, the food was good. The men and the women slept in separate quarters. The work was pretty hard at the airport, but otherwise it was not too bad till the Sestapur camp. That's when everything changed. We hoped that we stayed until the end of the war, but it didn't turn out that way. Any other questions?
How old were you when you were liberated?
I was 14 years old, and I was liberated.
Where did you go to live then?
Like I said, I was about 2 years or so. We were in and out of hospitals,
Okay.
and afterwards we got. I had three friends, and we got a building, actually an apartment, that the United States Army requisitioned from former high-level Nazis. And we moved in there, we didn't have to pay rent. The place we lived in, he was a dentist, and he was a gauleiter of the region there. And we asked him, we told him, he says, I hate to belong to the Nazi party, he says, because, excuse me, otherwise I wouldn't have any customers, which was a lie. Any other questions?
Howard, I so appreciate you telling us your story because I think that it's very difficult for survivors to relive everything. Was there anything that prompted you to want to tell your story?
Yes, thank you. You know, well, it's a little bit longer story because for my whole family, maybe 30, 35 grandparents, cousins, aunts, uncles. My father and I are all the survivors. In 1982, I read in the Milwaukee Journal, there was a woman in Marshfield, Wisconsin. She was a German war bride. She said that the Holocaust never happened. Maybe 200,000, 250,000 Jews got killed. That's all a lie. You know, Lithuania had 290,000 Jews before the war. And I understand, I read some information, some books, magazines, that 94% of the Jews in Lithuania were killed. It's the highest percentage. So when I read that, it got me a little bit angry. My father had survived the war and went back, evidently must have been in better shape than I was, because he went back to our hometown in Commerce, because anybody who would have survived would have gone back there. By the time my friend and I decided to go back, there were people coming back from Lithuania saying, don't go back there because the Russians were returning prisoners as traitors because we worked for the Germans. So we didn't go back. The way I found out when my father had survived, I had an uncle in Israel. I knew his name, but I didn't know his address. I gave it to the Jewish agency and they found him. And I got a letter from my uncle telling me that my father had survived and was in Kovna. That's the way I found out. And I used to get letters from my father, from my uncle, because I was in the American zone and I couldn't write directly to him. So he used to write to my uncle and my uncle used to send me the letters. In 1970, they opened up tourism in Russia because they needed the dollars. So my friend went back to Lithuania because his brother of his had survived and a sister had survived. And in 1971, I went to visit my father with my wife. At that time, my wife was selling Avon. And she had a customer whose husband was a teacher, a civics teacher in Brookfield Central. And when he found out we went to Russia, he wanted to know why. So my wife told him the story. So when we came back, he was after me to come and speak to his classes. So in 1995, or I think 96, I started speaking, and I've been speaking ever since. And I hope I can have another couple of years, maybe. Any other questions?
So when you were a young boy, in a sense, traveling with your parents after you left and you had to move, did your parents tell you anything that in case they got split up from you, did they prepare you for what was going to happen to your mother and your sisters? Did they hint about the...
My parents didn't know anything. They couldn't prepare me for anything. They just told me to stay alive. That's it.
Do you remember the day saying goodbye to your mother or getting split from your mother and never seeing her?
The last time I saw my mother was in July 1944. She and my older sister were being shipped out to a work camp. And we waved to each other through the fence because they were a couple of fences over. We were not close together. We waved to each other, and that's all. We hoped to be alive. We hoped to. So that was it. You took care of yourself. And some people ask me, how did you survive? It's one question I can't answer. I know one thing. I wanted to survive. I wanted to see the end of Hitler. I didn't care if I would have died a couple of seconds later. I would have been very happy. Yet there were some people that gave up, didn't want to live. I had a friend here from the same hometown. We went to all the camps together. We were liberated together. He was a economics professor at MIT in Massachusetts. He told me a story about his uncle. His uncle was a dentist in our hometown. When the Germans came in, they asked for 500 prominent Jewish individuals in the city to come forward because they wanted to get a list of all the craftsmen in the community to help them in the war. Actually, there was a big lie. Because what they wanted to do, take the leaders of the community and get rid of them. This way you can have an uprising. So they took him out to the edge of town, made him dig ditches, gonna shoot him. His wife found out about it. She went to some prominent Lithuanians and practically got him out of the grave. He came home, he hung himself. He left a note saying, I do not want to live in a world where one human being can be so cruel to another. He gave up.
When did you first hear about or know what was going on with the gas chambers in the camps? I mean, was it the rumors, or when did you know?
You know, the grapevine in the camps was very good. We knew what went on. In July 1944, we were in concentration camp Studov. And without papers, without radios, without anything, we knew that they had tried to assassinate Hitler. Had they succeeded, I probably wouldn't be here. Maybe I would have gone back to our hometown, I don't know. But the grapevine in the camps was very, very good. We knew what went on. My friend had a little sister the same age as my younger sister. And when they were running away, the little girl got tired. So the mother put her on a horse cart. German planes came down and started strafing us. And the horses took off and the little girl got lost. She wound up in a ghetto in Vinski, Latvia. Little girls, 6 years old, blonde hair, blue eyes. There was a Latvian woman, they didn't have any kids. She used to work for Jews, she spoke Yiddish. And when she found out there was a little orphan in the camp, she told her husband to go in there and say that his niece, she got lost in the war. So he went in there to let him take her out. In 1943, we were in the camp together with the little girl's mother, which is my friend's mother. And she found out that the little girl was saved, and the woman saved her during the war, and she adopted the woman as her mother, and that woman came with her to the United States in 1985, and that woman has a tree in Yad Vashem with her name on it. She's a righteous Gentile because she saved that little girl. Now, how her mother found out about it, I don't know. I have no idea. But she knew that a little girl was saved. So the grapevine in the camp was very, very good. Any other questions?
Can you tell us about your childhood before all this happened?
My childhood, I thought, was pretty normal. We were very poor. My father worked in a shoe factory. My mother stayed home. I was never hungry. We always had enough to eat. We lived in a two-room house. One room where we slept, and another room where we ate. I went to a religious school because my mother was religious, my father was not. And my older sister went to a secular school. Excuse me. So life was pretty normal for me. I don't know. I wasn't as good a life as we have here now, because that was 60, 70 years ago. But life was pretty normal for me. I can't say anything bad about it. Any other questions?
When so many people died from overeating, how did you avoid that? How did that not happen to you? Or?
Well, like I said, we were in and out of hospitals for about 2 years.
Okay.
So I think that's why we survived.
How have these experiences shaped your faith? How have these experiences shaped your faith?
How much?
Your faith in God.
You know, about a year ago or so, maybe 9 months ago, I was listening to NPR, National Public Radio. I usually listen to it. And they had Elie Wiesel on. Everybody knows who Elie Wiesel is, right? And Elie Wiesel said he was angry with God. I couldn't understand it. I don't know why. Elie Wiesel was only in the camps for 8 months. I was in there for close to 4 years. I couldn't understand why Elie Wiesel was angry with God. God didn't do it. Human beings did it. God gives you a choice to be good or bad. The choice is up to you. It's not up to God. I'm sure God wants you to be good. I belong to a synagogue. I probably didn't go to as often as I should. But I believe in God. Any other questions? I know we're running out of time, so.
Maybe one more question? Last chance?
I'm wondering if, well, first of all, thank you for sharing your story with us. And I'm wondering if you saw any acts of great kindness between prisoners or acts of selflessness, that sort of thing.
No, there wasn't. People, normal people, like we are now, can't understand the life that was in the camp. It's impossible for me to explain it to you, because it's not, you don't have a normal